dude on the screen, Logan Schultz. And I do a number of things on campus. I should put that down before I hit someone. I'm the assistant dean in the Honors College. And many of you, so how many of you are not freshmen? Most of you are probably freshmen, right? Who's not a freshman? A few in the crowd, and then a few DIS current students. I brought some real live specimens for you to probe and ask about, things like that as well. So most of you are freshmen. I did the research symposium last weekend, so you're probably tired of hearing from me by now. I do that. I do a lot of ad hoc, like international program advising. I do scholarship stuff, and I also teach in chemical engineering. So if you have any questions about that type of thing, I'm upstairs as a resource always. One of the things I actually enjoy most from what I do is this DIS program. So I'm the director of the DIS, Directed Interdisciplinary Studies program, which you may have heard about, but you're here to hear more about, my understanding. And the reason it's so fun is I get to work with 12 super inspiring and unique students who blaze their own trails in what they want to do. And to be part of that is pretty fun. I tend to bounce around a little bit myself from administrating, and I did my degrees in 3 different countries, and because I couldn't decide where I wanted to be, and I did nanoscience, and I did chemical engineering, and some other things along the way. And so I kind of empathize and understand the desire for students to explore various ways of stimulating and learning. So that's a little bit about me. So I know you guys are mostly freshmen. You're here if you're interested. What have you heard about DIS, or what do you know so far? Don't all speak at once. Yes, Tommy.
I mean, you told me it was like very project based.
Yeah. Sometimes I confess that I can come off in a way when I describe it as project-based, as in the project is this grandiose and intimidating thing that will burden you like Atlas throughout your whole college career, and if you don't finish it, you're done. It isn't so much that, as the current DIS students laugh at me, it isn't so much that should stress you as much as it should direct you. And it should direct what you do in a purposeful way, and I'll talk about that a little later, but that was a good point. Anything else you've heard? Yes, Candyland. Candyland, I like that. The world is your oyster. You may choose how you would learn. With the resources you have at the university, across departments, across colleges, it's pretty, it is Candyland being here. And sometimes when you're in a degree program, you lose those resources along the way. And that's sort of what we're trying to do, is open those up for a student who has a reason to use the resources anywhere across campus. Candyland. What else? I promise I'll actually start talking more and not asking you guys so much. But what else? Yeah. Anything else? Yeah.
I did hear from someone you can do DIS in like another major as well.
Yeah, that's a very good thing to consider, particularly if one of your majors is something that requires professional accreditation. You know, you can't be a nurse unless you have a nursing degree. You can't be an engineer unless you've taken the fundamentals of engineering exam. You can't be an architect unless you have some certification in that regard. And so if that's a path that you might choose that requires professional certification, it's often a good idea to do a dual major. DIS, and then whatever that major is, so that you can qualify for those jobs that have a gated or a very formal degree requirement. That's a good point. So I'll talk now a little bit about history, about the program itself, who's a good fit, maybe who's not a good fit. Typically, the ideal students have an idea of maybe not what they want to be when they grow up, but a problem they want to pursue. So motivated, forward-thinking students who want to pursue something in the arts, in the sciences. It can be project, it can be company, it can be research, it can be art, it can be anything of that sort that is beyond the scope of a single program. So, if I stand up here, do you guys mind if I take this off? Anybody can complain? All right. I run out of breath when you're speaking. I hate speaking with one of those things on. But I understand it. So a perfect student is someone who is very curious about pursuing something that might direct them to a dream job. So say you want to be in a field. Every job you ever get is interdisciplinary. I also work as an engineer for a company in Anaconda. What I do as an engineer is 50% of it I never learned in engineering school. It's money management, it's writing proposals, it's dealing with law and regulations, it's managing people. Nobody ever in engineering taught me how to do that. Had I envisioned this being what I wanted to do instead of change career paths a dozen times, I could have designed a DIS program that taught me how to manage people, write proposals, etc. as an engineer. And so that's kind of an example. Some students will have a dream job that they want in a particular field, and they can frame the skill set around what does it require to be successful in that field. Some students have an idea of a law school, so say they want, or medical school, or a certain type of economics. If you want to understand agricultural economics, you need to probably understand a little bit about agriculture and economics. If you want to understand environmental law, probably should understand about environment, but also political science, things like that. If you want to write a book, you need to learn about what you're going to write about. If you want to start a company, design a process, etc., things like that. And here's some examples as well. So it doesn't necessarily have to be what you want to be when you grow up, but it has to be something you want to pursue, and it's going to be valuable for you to pursue that. So it's you think about that project, and then we help you design a course curriculum that takes at least 3 focal areas, gives you 3 advisors to focus on getting the skill set to do that. We'll look at that project and say, can you do that without having to learn this particular field, one of the 3? And if you could, then maybe the DIS isn't the best idea. So if you design a good project that really requires interdisciplinarity, then we learn through different disciplines on campus. 3 advisors on your team. You're sort of the reason why it's motivated and very independent driven students is that they kind of have to, as any DIS student will tell you, manage their advisors, including me. I'm like the 4th advisor, as well as 3 specific focus advisors. They might not see your whole big picture of what you want to accomplish, but they're helping you with getting into classes you need, advising you on projects, providing you lab resources, things like that. Motivating you, inspiring you, helping you in different ways. They don't all have to have the same role, but you need a team that supports you. That comes in very handy later on if you are applying to grad schools or law schools or companies, to have 3 advisors who know you very well and who can write letters of recommendation from 3 very different perspectives is a powerful, powerful thing to have in your arsenal as an applicant for whatever your next stage is. So it's something to keep in mind. You might underestimate the importance of having letters of recommendation and how that complete package looks as you progress on. And you're always going to need those letters of recommendation beyond school and jobs, everything for scholarships, for awards. So build that in a thoughtful way, and consider that on a side note, when you seek letters of recommendation, think of the whole package. Think of people that are saying different things from different perspectives and how that fits together, rather than just everyone saying the same thing about you. It's a really good way to think about it. Degree can be a Bachelor of Arts, or it can be a Bachelor of Science, depending on what it is. Right now we have 7 BS students and 5 BA students, but it can be, if you're pursuing something in the arts and humanities, it's often a BA. If you're pursuing something more science related, it's often a BS. It can be either one. Applications are due in February, so now's the time when we discuss plans and projects, and I'll kind of present a timeline later on for you if you're interested. Go back now for a little bit of a brief history. So the degree was created in 1980s. same decade I was created, believe it or not, and eliminated in 2009. And that was, I guess, it was sort of not being managed at the time, and it just filtered into no students, and so they just kind of eliminated the program. The wonderful picture of Dean Lee smiling on the right is an article when it was reinstated in 2015. I've been doing it for like 3 years, but I was very loosely involved before then, advising students. So I've been doing it for about 3 years. Alumni over that time have included some pretty successful people, 3 Truman Scholars, 3 Goldwater Scholars. This year, actually, the Goldwater Foundation officially put DIS as one of their, we've had to argue it in the past and appeal for it. Now it's an official degree that they accept for Goldwater applicants, which is kind of a cool thing. It really validates it as an option. A Rhodes Scholar, the youngest assistant U.S. attorney in the country, Ryan Archer, was a DIS student here. Now he's the head litigation lawyer for Boeing. Really great resource to have as well. Last year, Miles Maxer won a National Science Foundation GRFP. So he started a company called the Ant Network that his goal going into he kind of framed his DIS project around, I want an ant farm in every school in the country. And that was his goal. It was big. I like big picture thinking. And then we tune it down. He started a business. He hired 8 people to work for him. He made videos about educational science videos like framed around ant ecology, biology, social interaction, all that kind of thing, called the Ant Network. Look it up. It's really cool. Now he's doing a Ph.D. funded by NSF, which is like the highest honor for your PhD you can get. You can go anywhere in the country if you get one of these. And he's at an entomology program in Florida, University of Florida. So all over the board, but pretty cool. We tend to get really high quality students in the program. Part of the application process is rigorous, such that unless you're pretty motivated and serious, it's a burdensome process to go through. So currently we have 12 students. I think 5 are planning to graduate in the next year. I've been getting a lot more interest now that we're back in person. It's been kind of hard to put together project plans in the last 2 years. If you haven't noticed, Trixie, welcome. Another specimen for you to question at the end. But we have 12 students. We grew. So one of the things that we did this last year during the pandemic, as I mentioned, it was kind of hard. I found that students were wanting to do it, but they struggled to put together plans and timelines. It's hard to predict when you're going to have access to labs. It's hard to predict when you're going to have times to meet in person, and a lot of DIS projects are very on the ground type needs. We expanded the Oversight Board. So the Oversight Board is who approves any student who wants to get into the program. The idea there is we were sometimes not always getting upfront information from different colleges about requirements and gated issues, students getting into classes that are reserved for majors. And so we wanted to kind of formalize involvement from a faculty from every college on campus. So in the Oversight Board, 9 members plus myself, there's someone that's connected within every college on campus that can help serve as a resource if you're looking for classes, if you're looking for mentors, if you're looking for lab resources, space, that type of thing. This is a group of folks who I encourage all current and future DIS students to reach out to because they're familiar with the program and they're resourceful in those fields. Thanks to Isaiah and Pura, we were discussing this fall plans for a class that can be implemented so students can go through it and learn and actually fill out the application in the spring and meet students and just sort of explore, not as a commitment to the program, but explore interdisciplinary thinking, interdisciplinary careers, interdisciplinary options on campus, not just DIS, but also there's a couple other sustainable foods and bioenergy systems as an interdisciplinary degree, things like that. Unfortunately, I don't think we'll get it through approved this year because the requirements of going through, so I submitted the proposal, but got stuck in the course approval system and beyond the scope that they could approve it by the spring. It's approving a course on this campus, I've learned, is a headache time-wise. So that will be good to go though for next year. I don't foresee any issues, but getting it approved, because for registration, student registration happening starting this week really, or next week, I wasn't able to get approved by then. But it's in the works. Unfortunately, wasn't this year for you, but for next year we'll have an option for a class that students can go into. We're also focusing, I'm on strategic or planning council that kind of determines which goals on campus become prioritized every year. This year and the next year, priority goal 2.1, which is enhance interdisciplinary scholarship, is going to be discussed and supported on a campus level, which is actually really exciting for our program, because that's going to help with getting faculty incentives to co-advise across departments, getting faculty to get credit for advising people out of their departments, getting access for non-majors into classes. So this goes for students and faculty, this enhancing interdisciplinary scholarship. When faculty members, 3 faculty members advise 1 student, turns out they actually get to know each other in the meantime as well. So that's kind of a good thing for enhancing interdisciplinary scholarship. Current students, so we have some of them here, just to give you some ideas of what they're doing. If I'll go through and kind of explain roughly what they're doing. Actually, if they're here, I'll let them explain what they're doing, if that's all right with you guys. Combining, so for example, Atticus, he's combining architecture, sociology, and bioengineering to take a product from creation to building to humanity. You want to tell more?
Yeah, let me turn it up so I'm not facing the wall. So basically, the premise of the idea is that I'm interested in finding, new and different ways to solve aspects of climate change and waste pollution on the planet. And so the way that I've decided I can do that in undergraduate is I can try and engineer a building material out of waste plastic and carbon in terms of calcium carbonate. I can try and architecturally design with that material, so trying to think about the structural properties of that material and in the built environment, how it might be used. And then sociologically, I can look at how perhaps to convince people to adopt new sustainable technologies like that in a world where people tend not to like to change, but we do need rapid change to solve climate change. So trying to wrap those all 3 up into a project in the next couple years. Right now it's still in the laboratory, trying to make the whole thing work and trying to progress on to other things at the same time.
Cool. We'll have a chance at the end where you can ask questions to any one of these speakers or myself.
I might have to go a little early, but if that's okay.
What's that?
I may have to run a little early.
So if he's running early, does anyone have questions for Atticus about his project?
You getting an architecture certification?
So the undergraduate architecture major here is not an accredited program.
Yeah.
So whether or not I want to get architecture accreditation, it'll be a graduate program. So I did start out as an architecture major. Right now I'm probably, there's not a physically possible way I can get that major and a DIS in 4 years. So I've decided that I think the current plan is that I'll get a DIS and then probably get an architecture master's degree for accreditation purposes. Yeah.
Awesome. All right, so let's go down the list here. So Ian, he's revolutionizing the fashion industry with computer science, business, and human factors engineering. You want to explain more?
Sure.
With that lofty intro.
So for some context, I have never been able to find pants that fit. That's honestly the main reason for it and why I came up with it. There's just nothing with a 28 by 30 profile in an athletic cut. I've even gone to a Levi's factory outlet, asked about it, and they said, we don't globally manufacture that. So I thought, well, I've got this specific problem, but I'm sure a bunch of other people have the same problem with different dimensions. So how could I maybe fix that? And I noticed that we have 3D scanning technology. It's very new and hasn't been applied in many things, but some of you might even have phones with depth sensing cameras. So I thought maybe I could use that technology to, say, design a mall booth that you would walk into, get your measurements taken, and say get a pair of pants for $40 from the factory instead of getting a pair that doesn't fit for $30 or getting it tailored for $90. So I'm using computer science for the software end of that, industrial engineering for the manufacturing and systems design of customizable manufacturing for clothing, equipment, prosthetics, computer peripherals, anything you might 3D print or need to adjust. And I want to go into my own business, or at least have the business knowledge to integrate into another business doing similar things. So I'm studying that as well. And honestly, I'm not naturally good with people, hence the psychology. So that's roughly my plan, and my project itself is making a prototype of the equipment I would need to take measurements and using that to make a prototype product. Ideally, I'll extend that to more steps of the process, but we'll see what I get done while I'm here.
Isaiah is sucking your brainwaves out to, I like how I get to synthesize all of these, to tell you what you want in the world.
There you go. You want to be DIS majors.
Yeah, so Logan, great brief introduction there. I'm studying marketing, psychology, and neuroscience. So marketing and psychology have kind of always been used together. If you guys are in marketing or psychology, I'm sure you can easily see the line drawn between the two. And neuroscience sort of gives us the ability to measure the hard, cold numbers behind psychology. So a lot of the psychological measures rely on people telling you what they think, how they feel. But when we actually look at psychology, we find out that we as humans have a lot of bias. So we don't really know exactly what we're thinking or what we're feeling. We're not very good at reporting on that. So instead, we can just measure exactly what people are thinking and feeling when they're watching advertisements, when they are in grocery stores looking for different products. And so the study that I designed is an EEG study, so think electrodes on the scalp, that basically measures subconscious brain preferences. So the way that works is you're basically going to be prompted with a word, right, like soda, and then shown two different colors, like Coke Red and Pepsi Blue. And the idea is I should be able to measure the difference within 200 milliseconds of you guys seeing that color on which you associate more with the word soda. And so that has huge implications in the marketing world, because if you're walking around a grocery store thinking of the word soda, and you can see Coke Red better than you can see Pepsi Blue, then you're more likely to buy Coke Red. So that's a brief overview. A big social change that I'd like to see also is that nothing drives learning and change like economic value. So being able to integrate marketing and neuroscience is going to push both fields forward, and I'm really interested in seeing where it goes. Thanks,
Awesome.
guys.
So you walk through the booth, and Ian tells you what pants you need, and Isaiah tells you what soda you want. One-stop shopping. So let's see who's next on there. Jack Pearson. So Jack's writing a book as a BA. He's also doing a sets major, right?
Yeah.
Yep. You want to tell him a little more?
Sure. So I am double majoring. I'm taking 0 extra classes to do that, which maybe I am not allowed to tell people. But So I'm taking cell biology, English, and history, and history of science. And so
I hope I got it right, because I'm not even sure.
Yeah. And so I looked at. Well, it went back to like finding something that you want to do, maybe not like like your like childhood dream of like what you want to do, but so I knew that I would like to be a writer, and so I really enjoyed the DIS because I can basically get a first crack at it before I leave school, and then I can get rid of that like being poor part. Or at least a few years of it, hopefully. But so I wanted to write, and I wanted to learn about science, and I wanted to think about it in new ways. And so I pitched a book, a novel, so it's fiction, talking about science and exploration. And it's been a really fascinating kind of journey. I don't know, that sounds like a cliche word, but because while, I don't know, I'm not designing a project to like really fix anything in the world, I think my DIS project has really connected all of the disciplines that I'm studying. And it has kind of directed my education more than like my education directing what the project is. Because, for example, in my book, it's a lot about ice research and ice microbiology. It's not science fiction, but it is like about scientists and exploration. And that has led me to work in an ice microbiology lab on campus for the past few years, and really learning about who does science, how they do science, what science is. And my literature classes and my history classes have all kind of focused around the history of science and how who does science affects what science gets done, and how that can really bias things, and how also it can like lead to diverse viewpoints, and how you think about science affects what science gets done. And there's fascinating historical examples, and there's really beautiful books and poetry written about it. And so, yeah, that's my project. Yeah.
Are you gonna try and publish?
Yes. So I came in with way too high goals, and I went, I'm going to graduate with a published book. And then I went into my DIS interview, and they said, if you had a book right now, you probably wouldn't have it published by the time you graduate. And I went, oh, okay. And so,
Never set a timeline. This is as a scientist or researcher as well. It's contingent on publication because it gets hijacked by people that you never expect, and it gets taken out of your control.
yeah. So my like deliverable at the end is not publication, but it's working to get something that can then be submitted. So like it's up to the submission point instead of having to deal with the really uncertainties that come with publishing.
Couple notes as well. So he alluded to working in a lab. So for those of you in the symposium, Christine Foreman, who does microbiology, ice, and chemical engineering research, that's the lab he's talking about. He's also working with Michael Reedy, who did history of mountaineering. He's another one of his advisors of sorts. So if you want to connect those two stories from the symposium, this guy's doing that in his project. See who else? Uma Graham. So she did a conservation biology, sustainable food systems, and marketing. So she did a course like taught art classes, developed a curriculum to teach art classes associated with healthy foods and around the community. Pretty cool program. Elsa Bentz, she is staging a play, casting and staging a play in the Black Box Theater. It's going to be this spring, Orpheus Ascending. So she has theater. She was going to take her theater classes at the University of Bristol. So you can incorporate like a study abroad if part of your curriculum isn't at MSU. You can incorporate a visit at a university somewhere else. She was going to do it at Bristol, UK, all of her theater classes, because we don't have a lot of theater classes. The pandemic canceled that, so she's actually at University of Montana this semester. We worked that out so she could take the theater classes she needs. One of the things in thinking about curricula or degree programs is you don't have to just blaze your own trail as a program that never exists. But if you could think of a program that exists at another university, or some kind, a science illustration program, for example, or a environmental law, or there are programs that exist all over the country that we don't have, and you can sort of create that program with what we do have in courses, because we do have most of the courses, we just don't have them in a formal program. So that's another thing to think about. So she's doing staging and casting play. Clarissa Coos is combining paleontology, organismal biology, and art. She's been commissioned to do some big mural and several displays at the Museum of the Rockies. So she came here for the DIS program knowing she wanted to establish a career in science illustration. So she wants to draw for museums and books and scientific articles in such a way that is anatomically and biologically correct and creates creatures that no longer exist from fossils. So she was going on dinosaur digs since she was 11, has a dinosaur named after her actually, has a couple books written about her called Dino Girl. So she knows this is what I want to do. I want to draw, but in order to inform what I want to draw, I got to know my stuff when it comes to science and paleontology. So that's what she's designed her curriculum around. Trixie Lieber is here. Where is she? There she is. So she's doing political science, business finance, and French to kind of make Québécois and Canadians play well together. Tell more.
Yeah, so I'm originally from Montreal, and I went to school in French my entire life. I consider myself bilingual. My first words were in English, and I grew up speaking both languages at home. And all throughout my life, I found this sort of disconnect between people who are primarily French and people who are primarily English. This is an issue that is, I guess, specific to Canada. People would make fun of my accent, no matter what language I was speaking. It's kind of troubling experience, not awful, but I subconsciously kind of brought this in with me into my undergrad, and I was initially planning on doing a triple major in those three disciplines before I even knew about the DIS, and then it came to a meeting, much like you guys, and thought this was perfect, and why not harness all of my majors into something productive that can hopefully help to remove the bias that we experience in Canada. I'm interested in a career in government, so hoping that I can use this in some way to influence policy within Canada. I'm writing a traditional thesis, unlike most of the other students who have these elaborate projects. I'm just writing a classic written 60-page thesis. So there's really a lot of flexibility within the program, but you definitely have to know how you're going to connect all three of your disciplines, and you have to have a feasible outcome by the time you graduate.
Good advice. Brooke Dunnigan's here as well. So, a lot of musicians run into challenges in their lives as in business and in writing. So she's a musician, a pretty accomplished musician who is learning also about the business and writing aspect of it. Tell a little more specifics?
Yeah. So I came to a DIS meeting my freshman year, was like, that's way too hard. I'm not a motivated person, and was like, not going to do it. But then I didn't know what I wanted to study, and I knew I was passionate about learning and lots of different things. And talking with Dean Lee, she just kind of threw this idea out there and was like, what if you combined business and poetry and music? So you could write your own music, which is what the writing and literature is helping me with, taking a lot of poetry classes to mimic lyrical composition. And then music, obviously, music performance. And then how does a musician make it in the real world? Because ultimately they are a business and they have to market themselves. And I have no idea how to do that. So that's why I'm taking those classes. So I'll have a live performance for my project and an anthology of a number of songs.
The project could be an anthology, it could be a public art showing at the Museum of the Rockies like Clarissa's doing. It can be a traditional thesis like Trixie's doing. It can be a number of things. It has to be disseminated to the public. We'll talk about that a little later. So Kira Adamson, she's doing sociology, economics, and writing. She wants to do an institutional ethnography study of access to education around the state of Montana, based on the idea that lower socioeconomic upbringing has struggles with access to secondary education. Her project has sort of morphed a little bit recently into access to quality sex education is kind of how she's focusing with a similar framework. One thing is when you design and think about a project and you predict 3 years down the road, I'm going to do this. That's not till death do we part. That can be a living target that evolves slightly in terms of that. It's important throughout that process that you communicate that with us so that we can restructure as needed, because sometimes things come up and things like that. So she has sort of realized that what she really wants to focus on is access to sex education and redesigning a curriculum. So she's going to do a sex education curriculum and try to promote it in certain high schools around the state. Caroline Rader, she's interested in law school, and so she's doing a study on how people perceive value of public lands, with the idea of proposing legislature to address public land usage, basically. Calvin Servine, he is entrepreneurship, sustainable design, and industrial engineering. He is trying to make a zero waste packaging company that basically will deliver, or the technology associated with wrapping up groceries in a system that can be delivered and then recycled back to you with waste, with food waste, in a zero packaging way. So pretty ambitious. He's a pretty ambitious, business-minded entrepreneur too. So there's some examples, and hopefully that kind of triggered some ideas of how a project can be focused and how diverse they can be. Really, it's pretty incredible. Some of the requirements in general: at least 120 semester credit hours. So that's the same with any degree you get on campus. 30 in each discipline. So this comes into play when you start thinking about and proposing your curriculum, your coursework, and hopefully you ask folks in the department about it, you ask advisors about it, and designing that. We can help. It takes a bit of time. Students can maybe give you advice on how to do that better. I haven't had to design my own curriculum before, but 30 credits from each discipline have to be, 30 credits have to come from each discipline, 18 from each discipline upper level, so 300 or 400 level. Text and critics is a requirement. So if you haven't had text and critics yet, then you can still take 301 as a non-freshman, for example. Maintain a 3.0 GPA and attend monthly DIS meetings. The idea there is to keep us in contact as a community and to keep us aware of what challenges or changes need to happen before you get to the point of graduation, and then your contract is too late to change, basically. So keep us involved, and we can allow that to evolve. 8 credits devoted to a research and creative project. So that's basically providing you time and credit throughout the process to devote towards your project. So typically it can be spread out, but up to 5 credits per semester of your 490R. It can be junior year 3 or 4, senior year all 8. You can do 5 one semester, 3 another, and it gives you time and credit for pursuing and achieving what you need in your project. And then at the end in your defense is a public presentation, and that can be a research talk, it can be an art show, it can be a musical performance, things like that. Any questions about program requirements? Nope. The application is available online. I'm not going to go through all the details, but this is what it looks like here. Names, majors, disciplines, advisors, 3 essays. One is what is comment on your undergrad research, your undergrad education, give an account of why you want to be in the DIS, basically. We don't want to allow students in the DIS unless we think as a committee that it's good for them. Otherwise, we're potentially setting students up to pursue something that isn't valuable to them, that isn't a good fit. Describe how it's going to facilitate your post-graduation goals. What is that vision? What's directing you in this project? And then what's your proposal? What's your project proposal? So those are the 3 things you need to submit as part of it. And that's really pretty much all there is to the application. But there's a lot involved in coming up with a project proposal, meeting with your advisors, iterative. It's a very iterative process. In short, application 2 essays, project proposal is kind of like a 3rd essay, course plan, 3 advisors, 2 letters of recommendation. Course plan looks something like this. We're working on ways that this maybe could be a little bit more straightforward, but this is what Don Major likes to work from. The idea is discipline 1, 2, 3, lower division, upper division, you had your diversity, your core classes, your research credits. It all should add up to 120 or more. And my advice is usually don't get too far in the weeds of this early on, because as your project evolves, so will this. This is meant to give you classes that are relevant. We'll go through this as a committee, and we'll go through this and say, is that class important for what you're trying to accomplish? And if it's not, we'll try to find one that is. So the idea here being that every class is directly related to what you need. Because how many of you are in a major where you look at the 4-year curriculum and you look at classes and you're like, I don't want that. Henry was talking to me about that last week. I don't need an art class. I know how to do that. I don't need this class. It's not interesting to me. This allows you to cut all that dead weight and just get the classes you want. So if something's not valuable to you, that's our goal, is purging that from your life. Cleanse yourself. BIS project. So this is what should allow you, this is what should provide you so much value to whatever you do next. The idea that you can show an accomplishment, you can show a book, you can show a piece of music, that has power beyond a degree. You can show a product, you can show a company, whatever it is. You can show a research manuscript from a study that you've published. That in and of itself, that was supported by your courses, is what you sit across the table from on a graduate, on a Ph.D. interview or a job interview, and you say, okay, maybe I don't have an architecture degree, but look at what I designed and what I did, et cetera. And so that's what gets you really in the door. And so it's important to you not to think of this as I mentioned before, this, oh my God, I need this overwhelming PhD level, life-altering thing, but I need something that's valuable. Something that's valuable. So that's really why I like to focus on that. It's the most valuable asset. It must be interdisciplinary. Synthesize your focal areas. So if we look at that project and say, could you accomplish that with a English degree in and of itself? And if you could, then we might say you should just get an English degree. So as we're vetting the project, we're looking at interdisciplinary. Is it interdisciplinary? Because otherwise, if you can accomplish this deliverable and you can show that at your interview without having to do that, and you also have a degree that has more of an identity, like English, architecture, computer science, whatever, then you don't necessarily need it. So that's kind of what we're thinking of. Think big. I encourage you to, in talking to your advisors and talking to me, I want to put an ant farm in every school in the country. That's big. A lot of students think, I want to start a zero waste packaging company. That's big. You're probably not going to do that in a DIS, in a 4-year college degree. Like, we get it. But if you think big, we'll help you cut that down to something reasonable to get your foot in the next step, because that's a long, it's a long process if you want to have an ant farm in every school in the country. So think big. It's easier to cut back than it is add things when you think of a project. So if you start a project and say, well, I want to, I want to, determine how many students on campus have, got COVID or something, and walk around and do a survey. So that might take you, a couple days. Now we're going to be like, okay, now what are you going to do with the research part of that and the translation part of that and the policy part of that? It gets hard to add things. So start big and work there. Some general benefits, and we've really discussed this. It's a skill set. We hope you come out of it as individual project management skills, 3 advisors, letter of recommendation, a tangible product. That's really your project, and then a stepping stone or whatever it is you want afterwards as a degree. So the next steps. This is probably my last slide, really. Where do you start? This was sort of put together on the application and the website I have up there. You can find it through the Honors College website. It has more information as well. Start out with meeting with myself, meet with someone on the Oversight Board, meet with a current student, Dean Lee, just kind of discuss your situation. And so if you're interested, and I know there's a couple people here who I have meetings with scheduled already in the next couple days, Meet with us and discuss these ideas as they iterate. You don't have to just step in the door and have the solution finalized. It's an iterative, communicative process. That's when we create brainstorm ideas for these projects, and then we decide, okay, what are the fields? Then we start figuring out coursework. What are the fields that help you get to that point? Plan a curriculum with your advisors, determine classes, and then you finalize your application. Applications are due February 25th in order for you to start next year. We do accept applications all on a rolling basis. So if your application is ready tomorrow, then we can certainly accept that. February 25th is the date at which we can process, approve, interview, go through all that in time for you to register for next semester. So that's kind of the spring semester. You can apply only after your second semester of your freshman year. That's the earliest you can apply. Most of your freshmen, so that's why I'm saying that's when the next application deadline is. Because you have to prove that you're capable of accomplishing, good grades and success in the college that you're in as it is, before we allow you that freedom, that candy land of blazing your own trail. So that's it, really. I'll, allow hopefully time for questions. You can ask me questions. You can ask any of our EIS specimens questions. Do you guys mind maybe standing up here so we can get directed? Yeah, tell me.
My first question is there funding available to help EIS students carry out projects? Maybe not through the honors college, like what historically have students used for funding sources?
So funding, the question was, is there funding available? That's like everything in DIS, it's kind of a case-by-case basis. If you're research related, you can certainly apply for USP funds, VPR funds. Atticus isn't here, he's got VPR funds, USP funds. Have you guys gotten any USP funds if you're doing research at all? So most of them aren't doing like lab research much, but there's ways like that. There are also private donors that we can request funds from if it's meeting what they want to do. There's INBRE funds if you're in a medical related thing. There's it totally depends on the field. But that's part of the feasibility would be the word of your project is, if you want to design it, if you want to plan a project and we look at the feasibility and we say, I don't know that you're going to have the funds to do that, then you got to prove otherwise for the feasibility, or at least with a reasonable framework. Yeah, no.
So will you or members of the DIS Oversight Board, will you guys help us find advisors, or are we supposed to do that all by ourselves?
We can certainly help you find advisors. What I would ask of students, though, in that situation is to have a sense of what they want. The better we can understand your goals, the better we can match you with an advisor.
I can kind of touch on that. I'd say a big part of why you have to wait until you've completed 2 semesters before applying is so that you have time to develop relationships with professors within each department. I worked as a TA for my advisor for political science. I spent a lot of time with my advisor for French, and my advisor for the finance club is also my advisor for my DIS program. So it was a lot easier. Like I already had these people backing me and supporting me in other endeavors, so I could just go directly to them and they were on board right away. So that's why, probably right now you're like, oh my God, who would I talk to? But as you start taking more classes, even within each department, for instance, within political science, there's international relations, there's political theory. So each professor has their specific research interest, and then you can kind of figure out what your research interest is kind of targeted at, and then find an advisor by taking those classes. If that makes sense.
And I sort of had a very different experience in finding my advisors. I didn't know any of them before I was basically getting my application ready. So my process was more like looking online and looking at the different areas of research that different people had, and then reaching out to them via email and just being like, hey, can we sit down and meet and discuss this? So.
I think mine was somewhere in between. I took a class from one of them, John Paxton. He's on the Oversight Board, and he's the head of the computer science department. If you have any interest in that direction, he is great to work with, and I think he would be happy to take on other students. I think he recommended one of the others, maybe both. And I know I did some research on possibilities for at least one of them. And I either emailed those professors or just found them in their office and said, hey, here's what I'm doing. Would you be interested in helping me out with it?
Yeah.
And I've gotten to know them better, and it's been great.
Just going off that, a really big aspect of the DIS program is being autonomous and reaching out to people that you've never met before, whether it's an advisor, a professor, like a future employer, or someone you want like to collaborate with on your project. Like, you really need to be good at just throwing out emails to people and responding quickly, and even just like the whole aspect of planning your degree involves a lot of this like work. Yeah, like organizational skills. You have to be really motivated and on top of it.
I will say though, if you don't know how to do all that, but you're willing to try
Yeah.
and send an email out into the blue, you'll learn
You
from
can
it.
start by sending us an email out of the blue.
But the idea there is it's also, it takes that gumption to make that first contact. That's a big requirement, but you should also accept that it's a very iterative process. So I might not know, out of just the sky who my perfect advisor is, but if I go to, I might talk to one faculty I know in that department, who then might give me a recommendation, who then might give me another recommendation, and I'll follow that to the right advisor. If you ask me who's going to be the best advisor in, the College of Business that I need, I don't know all the professors and what they're working on in the College of Business, but I can say, talk to Peter Nayland, he probably does know. I can say, talk to John Paxton, he knows about anybody that's in computer science. So that will lead you not to your advisor, but to someone who can maybe help you out. So embrace that iterative process of finding through the path. Henry, you had a question?
Yeah, you talked about like the identity of the project. When at the time of graduation, you get to like name your degree, like BS, BA, but you get to say like, I don't know,
Yes.
make it sound pretty type of thing.
Yeah, and you guys might not even be aware of this, but this will go on soon. I don't know how soon, where on your diploma it can say BA in Interdisciplinary Studies with a focus on X. And that is based on one of the first things that I did when I started this 3 years ago is I think it was Jack came and was like, hey, I can't apply for any scholarships in my department.
No.
Yeah.
That was fun.
And so I thought this was a problem because students who become a DIS student lose all the benefits that they would otherwise get in a department that has things like, scholarships and graduation ceremonies and listservs and all that kind of stuff. So now we have it so that you declare a home department, so that say you want to be in, business and engineering and Spanish, and you decide I want to focus, my home department is business, you can graduate with the College of Business, you can apply to scholarships in the College of Business, and you can graduate with your diploma that says I have a BS in Interdisciplinary Studies with a focus on business, something like that.
I do think some departments will let you apply for their scholarships regardless of being in the DIS. Like, I think computer science does let you do that. It just depends on the department.
Gotcha.
For you in the business and finance, what mentors would you suggest?
So like what realm of business, like finance specifically?
Yeah, like I talked with Peter Nayland. He said Francis.
Karen's? Yes, totally. My advisor is Gary Caton.
I'm sorry.
Gary Caton.
Very good.
Yeah. You can email me and I can tell you more about it. And you should join the finance club.
If you guys want any of our emails, they're all available on the DIS website, which is under the Honors College page, so look there.
Yeah, MSU DIS, it should be the first result, and you just scroll down and it's got all our names and emails.
What more? I can stick around as well if anybody has individual questions, but yeah.
So for you guys, did you more decide on like what you wanted your project to be first, or did you think I like these 3 subject areas, what project would come from that?
For me, it was like, I was very scattered and taking all sorts of classes trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And so talking with different professors, it was like, well, I really like music, but I also want to be a good writer and a better like musician with writing. And through that, it was like, well, you could, like, I think the first project idea was recording an album, and then that was too big. It was like, that's a lot to like record in a studio and do that. So for me, it was more like, these are things I'm interested in. Also, I just want to be a better writer and like know more about business just as a person in the world. And so that they fit together in this project that I'm also really passionate about. So, yeah.
I knew exactly what I wanted. Who asked again? I knew exactly what I wanted to do when I got to college. I knew like I wanted to go into neuromarketing, but I had no idea how to design a project using neuroscience. So I knew about it coming in, but I applied pretty late because it took me like a couple of years to get a little bit of a neuroscience background so that I could figure out how to design a project that would meet the program's requirements.
So is there a point where it's ever too late to apply into the DIS degree?
It all depends on how long you want to stick around college. You know, you can imagine based on the curriculum requirements of 30 credits in each department that the longer you get on, the longer it's going to, you know, it'll take. By the end of your freshman year, it's practically very feasible for pretty much any direction you take to graduate in 4 years. If you go in the sophomore year, unless you've already taken up front classes in at least 2 of those fields, it gets a little harder. With that said, you know, a lot of DIS students, like a lot of honor students, I advise that if you can afford 5 years of education, you can often get a lot more out of it, because if you're incorporating a study abroad, if you're incorporating a work in a research lab, internships, all those kind of things, just practically speaking, like if you're that sort of an ambitious student who wants to squeeze everything you can out of university, you can squeeze a lot more in 5 years than you can 4. You really can. Because otherwise you're on a conveyor belt that's just like, I need this, 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 and then I'm done. So I transitioned that into advice, but the truth is that it just sort of depends. You know, if you're applying if you're applying in your sophomore year, 4 to 5 years, depending on how well it fits. If you're applying in your junior year, your 3rd year, you know, you might be another 2 years or 3 years even.
I will note though that the disciplines don't necessarily have to be traditional departments.
Yes.
So that might help you fit things in better after the fact. And remember that you can apply your credits however you can justify them.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have a bunch of math classes, which would normally be core, or you got them from AP credit, but they justifiably apply toward one of your disciplines as like things that are prerequisites or good to know for the later classes in that category, you can slot them in. And as long as you can justify it, you can usually get away with it. And that also applies to fitting in another department sometimes. Like one of my disciplines is listed as human factors engineering, but really it's industrial engineering and psychology. So I'm taking classes from both of those, and some of those psychology classes made more sense slotting into the business and entrepreneurship category. So it's fairly flexible. And to answer your question as well, I had probably 5 or 6 things I was vaguely interested in coming into college, and I came into MSU undecided. I got about halfway through designing a project with one set of classes and disciplines before I realized that it wasn't really quite what I wanted to do, because I might enjoy it, but I could think of about 2 companies in the world I could be employed in and enjoy that. So I decided to change it up, and with about a month to spare, I came up with my current plan. So I would say find the things you're interested in and then think about ways you could do something new with that, with a project or thesis. And once you have a project idea, adjust your categories to match a little bit, and then just keep adjusting from there.
For me, for my French section, I had all my lower division classes waived because I'm a native speaker. So I filled those in, kind of like we said, with core classes. I tossed in sociology, anthropology, math, statistics, some lower level business stuff, and I was able to justify it, like rightly so. And it made sense and it worked out.
Yeah, it's great advice to note, though, that your focus areas do not have to be degree programs on campus. So human factors engineering is not a degree or department on campus. They can be anything that makes sense in a collective, logical way. But I would caution you, later on, if you apply in your junior year, for example, and you try to just randomly put in classes that don't match part of the application process, and that doesn't often happen when students are applying as a freshman or early sophomore, but part of the application process is that the committee can just weed things out. Just say, you don't need this math class in your French discipline, like get that out of there, and they won't give you credit. They'll say you need to take something else. So that's what all 9 Oversight Board has an input on that, because they're familiar with the curriculum from the different colleges. So there is a filter there that you need to justify. You can if you can do that. But.
Oh yeah, and all your advisors have to approve of the plan. So you're not just like cherry picking the easiest classes ever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In my experience, though, when you're putting together your course plan, if you have a project you want to do and fields you're interested in, you'll have to remind yourself to only put in the minimum of requirements, because you don't have to require that you take all the classes you're interested in, and the less you require, the more flexibility you have. So
yeah.
Try to slim it down to the minimum possible, and keep in mind electives you might want to take on top of that if they'll fit. And also remember that you don't necessarily have to make a nod to a traditional program. If a traditional program says you need a general stats class, if you don't need it, don't put it in there just because a traditional degree would require it.
Yeah.
Also, I want to add that when you are going up to professors, you don't have to say these are the classes I want to take on your own. That's also something that your advisors put in. I know I walked up to Michael Reedy and I said, this is my project, this is what I want to do, and I haven't taken a history course before, and he went, okay, you're taking these. And I went, okay. And so usually it's a mix between that. And so you have some choice, and you also have your advisors, you do have to do what they say a little bit.
So I know you guys are probably heading off to funner things tonight, but we won't keep you all, but I will stick around here, and I don't know if some of the students will as well. If you want to come up and ask specific questions. Also, feel free to send me an email if you want to set up an appointment. I'll be gone next week in Disney World, so.